Welcome, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with the start of my new series of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8.52. We are playing as Britain, the British Empire this time. I hope you will join me on this adventure of playing a whole new nation. I have never played Britain before, so I'm going to really want your input. I'm sure many of you have. I've obviously focused heavily on Germany when playing Hearts of Iron. Not entirely, but heavily, because I've been testing my mod Third Reich events a lot, just to keep going back to that. So this is going to be a very new experience for me. I hope you will enjoy watching my learning experience as well as contributing to it by, like I say, let's get in here, by your comments while going on. We'll love to hear your tips, because if you see me heading straight for a wall, tell me to turn right or left, or however best, or hit the brakes on something. Really can use that help and would appreciate it. I hope this is going to be fun and interesting events to go through. I have put in just a handful of events from Third Reich events that deal specifically with Britain that you normally don't see. I mean, very, very few. And a few other corresponding events for Germany or other nations, but that's just very few. Just want to get that out of the way. You'll see a couple of things like that. Mostly just wanted to show off what most players don't normally see that do affect the games, but you don't see. Okay, we're going to go through our setup now. We have a lot of choices here. I think we're going to do political spying this time. Normally I start out with economic spying, but they've nerfed that down so much, it's hardly worth it. What I'm looking at is the 80% here, as well as the trying to bring up the Conservative Party, because that's who we're going to more or less play as, playing this through. So we're going to do political spying, which will help ruling party support. Well, this is going to be a different world playing with Britain. Do the military academy and economic boost. Okay, well currently I don't believe I have any of the where are they? Yeah, you know, Railroad Tycoon or National Highways ready to, but I've researched here. No, up here, giant infrastructure projects. Obviously there's none there, so we don't have any of those yet. I don't know if our research will get done in the first of the year, in this first year, so even if I research them, they get done, they can still happen in the next year. So we're not going to go with long term. It's good, long term's good for the money and required to get those strategic effects which you want to get when you're ready for them. So right now we're going to go with the 10% IC boost. It will hurt our money just a little bit, but I think it's worth it. And these all have a temporary negative, so we're not going to do them just yet. Send help to... That's the wrong one, but I don't believe they're currently keeping up the Black Ice web page with all the new updates of the game. This happens when you're dealing with modders. Real life intervenes, and people, you know, do something, but you know, can't keep up the ongoing support for it. We're going to Not do anything over Abyssinia right now. We're going to let that fall. We want to be able to recruit. And we're going to let this sit for just a second. We're just going to let it sit there. Let's look at national recruiting policy. I don't know if it's just entirely my predisposition, but I also think it's useful for various nations. If I was looking at a nation like playing China or maybe Russia, the open the ranks to everyone would be good because you just need the mass numbers. With Britain, and I just partially because I haven't played it, and partially, well, no, let me adjust that. Heavily because I don't trust the AI. Britain can do very well and did. I'm going to sort of play this as my somewhat understanding of historical Britain, if you will. It can do very well as a small elite army and use either somebody like France, Soviet Union, or the US to build up the sort of mass army to deal with the opponents. Maybe my experiences playing on the Allies will change how well I think somebody like AI US will do, but I have my doubts. So if I thought they were going to be aggressive and that I was just sort of going to follow along and be sort of elite support, I might take going after a smaller army, which that was sort of Britain's. You can sort of separate out Britain from the Empire. We'll be talking about that going on, but sort of Britain's aspect, and that they were awfully a much more motorized force. Not more than the US, but more than Germany was on the whole. You're talking about British. But because I don't trust that, and so I'm wanting to deal with, make sure I have enough manpower, we're at least right now we're going to do the balanced approach. And let's also do the leader backstory now. Okay. Takes a while to set this up, but it's worth it. I mean, not just this, but the backstory, but the whole game. Once you get it set up, it flows very well. So it's part of the reason for doing these videos is to talk people through this. This is a really cool idea. I don't know how well it's going to work in a game. I have not really played a proper game with this, but it's a really cool idea. So we're going to go with it. Okay, your mother. Have a bunch of choices. They obviously give these basic effects, plus I think other effects when putting things together. A lobbyist, a political negotiator, researcher, correspondent, respected community leader, gave you up for adoption. Okay, we're going to go with respected community leader because, as I said before, we're going to try to work on getting our national unity up. So I think that's going to help. Your father. Now, we're going to go with a very British sort of solution and going as an adventurous sailor. That sort of quintessential Britain. So that will help with the naval organization. Now, this I'm going to go, I guess, as a personal thing, though it also does have the nice effect of the leadership modifier. Starting out, when I was really young, I wasn't that into books. It took me a while. But once I did get into books, I've been heavily into books ever since. So we're going to go with that as sort of a personal choice. I mean, you can go with well-rounded, bunch of other good options here, but we're going to go with that one. Okay, backstory. We're going to go with, since we're looking at English, we're going to go with like a famous soldier. You've got a lot of would, if they had it, go with a famous admiral, you know, Nelson or Hood or somebody, but they don't have that one as an option. But there were a lot of famous soldier adventure types, Wellington and many others. So we'll do that. And also, to go along, there's a bunch of options here. We're going to go with also the quintessential Britishes that you were previously in the Navy. That's sort of the British thing. Okay, and we're going to go with the Bank of International Settlement. We want the effects of that. And we're going to do the black ice start. I know a few of you posted that they wanted me to try it out on hard. And that's sort of how black ice has been tested for, partially significantly to make up for the lousy Hearts of Iron AI, partially just because a lot of black ice players have played Hearts of Iron to death a lot, so that they're looking for another more of a challenge. I'm going to go with normal just because I haven't played Britain before. That's my main reason, because I just don't know how difficult it's going to be in doing so. So we want to go with that. And most of these modifiers are things to modify production levels and things like that that make up for bad AI. And that opens up various difficulty settings, and we're just going to go with normal on all of these. For better or for worse. Whether they're our allies or our enemies. Normal France gets a lot of penalties. Normal USA. And normal Germany. And a new day is dawning. That sort of initiates your leader unit. So, I like this. I like the, since we picked as being naval, they have the naval shoulder board there. That's nice. So, now if you rename this U unit, my understanding is bad things will happen. So I think you can change up here, because that's the divisional name. It's the actual brigade that if it gets renamed, bad things will happen. So if I understand correctly, so don't go about renaming that. Okay, we're gonna let this play briefly. I want to lose the Great Depression effects that we are currently heavily under. Okay, we Lost high property. These, so we'll now boom up. I'm also going to take what I think is the closest to historical choice for Britain. I think that's heavy aircraft. To me, light aircraft are like the Japanese, who most of their fighters and bombers were so offensively focused that they didn't have any armor on them, which greatly increased their range, greatly increased their speed. So where Germany and Britain and the US had armor on their airplanes, self-sealing fuel tanks and other things like that. I think the British tanks are gasoline engine. I'm not sure. I know I could look it up, but I don't know right offhand. Generally speaking, well, early on there were a lot of the riveted tank armor types with Britain, but as time went on, they used much more of a cast armor style. Not that they didn't do any welding on their tanks, obviously they did, but they were more of a welded armor. So we're going to go with welded armor. Welded armor, as you can see here. Oh no, with cast armor, sorry. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Misstating. Yeah, because no, it's cast armor. Like I said, they did do some welding, but it's primarily cast. It increased build speed for armor, but it gives heart attack penalties there. So we're going to go with that. And creation of battle commanders, great news. Okay, this is one thing that I don't like. I'm very ambivalent about having it in on this this playthrough. I don't like these. Not that they're bad in and of themselves, but they're sort of random. If they were tied to real historical events that either had a random chance of happening or not, or had various effects, that might go off the historical path, I would be very happy with them. But because of their random nature, maybe all very reasonable, but I just not a terrible fan of these, so I'm very close to deleting them, but I haven't. So we can go with various things, and they do have positive as well as negative. You can do that, not now and never, but we're going to play with them for now. Let's hope we get a good one with parliamentary issues. Oh, the Bedford truck. Well, I believe that's like a post-war 1950s Bedford truck. The 15 Commonwealth. What? CWT. I forget exactly what that means. Ton something Commonwealth. Weight ton. I don't know. Truck. It has more of a. The one I'm used to seeing for World War II is much more a squarish front end, but I'm pretty sure it's 1950s. But oh well. Yeah, it's just me picking apart things. Royal Ordnance Factory in Leeds. Yes, we want that, even though we're not starting to build arms right just yet, really. They're doing something with Sten guns there. So those are Sten guns. Don't know if they're presumably building them, but could theoretically be dismantling them after the war, but I don't know. Definitely doing something with Sten guns piled up. Cool. So we're going to let this go just briefly. Okay, now we've gotten rid of the Great Depression effect. And we built some aircraft. So now we're readjusting this. We're not going to do any upgrading just yet. But what we will do here, well, before we continue, this is sort of a trick I learned. I don't know how well it's going to work now. What I've tried to do is just to explain what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to maximize the amount of ICs I don't know if what we've done, available ICs versus base, is going to help or not. But I'm trying to maximize it here, because when we do our annual national focus here, keep calm and carry on, that is obviously now sort of a common t-shirt saying from the a common t-shirt saying, referring back to this time period, but they never used that. The keep calm and carry on campaign was designed for if, and they had several of these sort of levels of these things, if Britain actually got invaded and there were, German troops in Britain fighting, that's when they were going to roll out the sort of red sign, keep calm and carry on, and put it out there. So they had it prepared. It was definitely a war thing that they had prepared, but they never needed it because Germany never succeeded in landing troops, because they wanted people in the north of Britain to just, like if they landed in the south, just to keep calm and carrying on and trying to survive and work in the factories and not, do what happened basically in France, is when everyone panicked and got on the roads and started running away from the war. All that, they were just trying to keep everybody going, and hopefully, because you do have a situation unlike, say, France or Poland, if Germany did invade with a significant force, you very well might be able to trap the force or limit the force's reinforcements and supply because of the sea, so that they wouldn't be able to constantly, theoretically, move in large numbers of more forces if your air power was shooting down the transports and sinking enough invasion barges. If you had the sort of stick-to-itiveness to keep fighting, the initial invasion force might be destroyed, forced to retreat, whatever, if you stuck to it. Where, in Belgium or something, they just keep rolling more units in. So it made a lot of sense as to what they were thinking, but not what ended up happening. But it's a cool saying. We're gonna go with build up the economy. At this point, I think it's better than any of the other options. I'm a sort of an infrastructure guy when you have this time. More ICs now, build more ICs for later, that kind of thing, that will allow us to do more. So this is where, okay, only one manufacturing plant in Bristol. I was hoping to get more, but I guess that's the limitations. You do obviously see the negative effects there. The boost is good, but the boost only lasts for this year, where if I build the manufacturing plant, it'll be there through the rest of the game. So you'll want to do those type of things to build it up. So, and then now that, because it's all, 5% here. So we want to do all of those. And we will take the African Army units. And Seaport also go up to level 2 here. We want to get all that out of the way. Now, we want to build up our industry. I've been looking a little at Britain, as you might expect. I'm getting ready for this series. Let's build out in Belfast, get away from possible bombing, and mentioning that, let's go over to Newfoundland. Build another factory over there. I noticed that there was no defensive setup here in Edinburgh. Has anybody ever seen or heard of Edinburgh Castle? Now, I know not every castle in Britain would or should constitute a significant defense for the province on a modern war scale, but a combination of that castle and the sort of structure of Edinburgh I would say that that would equate to a minimum, at least a pillbox under this, but maybe even a fortress, maybe. Now, I would say Stirling, this is obviously not a picture of Stirling. Stirling Castle is rather nice, high prominent place. And see, like Edinburgh Castle, Stirling Castle was also significantly rebuilt and reinforced during the Napoleonic era. So it's not like some medieval castle with medieval walls. No, they're built to withstand sieges of a Napoleonic heavy siege train, which obviously doesn't have nearly the firepower as a modern high explosive situation. So it isn't quite that, but I could easily mount some good anti-tank guns and some anti-aircraft guns on Stirling and control the sort of river access flat area there heavily. And another one I also looked at particularly is Fort George in Inverness. I've been there. That's a entirely in like a Napoleonic era built fort. So they tore down the previous Fort George and built it up there. That's a huge, you can look it up, it's a huge garrison complex and the sort of barracks, and it's still in use today, I think, as an ongoing British barrack situation. The barracks, you could flatten those fairly easily with an artillery bombardment, but the walls are, huge, thick Napoleonic cannon walls with positions in them. I would put that as at least a level 1 fortress. Now, this isn't a black ice criticism. This is a paradox criticism. Because with that, you could easily, it would be a well-defendable place. It's no Gibraltar, but then again, I'm not suggesting anything more than a level 1 defensive capability. And also down here, this has coastal defenses, presumably based on Dover Castle, but should also get a level 1 fortress because it was upgraded during World War I to better defend the region without so much really touching the surface elements of the castle. And it was even upgraded more during World War II. Again, not overly developing the historical surface elements of the castle, but with significant tunneling systems that would have allowed as a good central headquarters and fighting places to hold that. So those would be good improvements to Britain, something that when I get to my British events mods someday off in the future, I will get to for Hearts of Iron 4 to make sure that things like that are done. And so long as we have, the gradation levels of all the way up here is some sort of, Gibraltar or other ultimate more modern fortification, super Maginot Line kind of stuff, to being, whether you have the pillbox difference between the fortress difference, but at least level 1 kinds of things would be useful. Now, I've noticed looking around, there's not very many, and the 1 or 2 places that I found heavy industry already had maxed out regular industry, but I want to again mostly try to build somewhat away from likely German bombing. Glasgow was particularly then a heavily industrialized shipbuilding city. Okay. And Bristol was a bit of a fading port city, or had been for some time. Yeah, we'll go with that. Okay, I think that would be good. Let's move all these down to the bottom. In going from my Germany strategy of concentrating production on, at least in the first few years, on ICs, I think will be a good idea. Okay, give them money for metal. No, I don't think we need to do that. Effects. No, we're not going to do this. Military vehicles, yes, we want those. No, let's adjust. Make sure we're producing enough supplies since we can. Unlike Germany, I don't think we're going to have to be selling supplies to buy much in the way of raw materials, though fuel I think is an issue, but I think we can sell off raw materials. Now this is going to be interesting. I think there is a sea lion invasion possibility. Don't know what the conditions are for it, but that should be something that would be interesting. Oh, nope, I didn't want to do that. Okay, now I just messed everything up. Oh, okay, back to good. Now I'm leaving the few built air units there. One, because I'm not upgrading anything. Two, primarily because, well, they're there. I don't believe they eat any supplies. Or if I put them on the map, they would eat a minimum amount of supplies. Give them money for metal. Why do they want to sell me metal? Oh, because I barely have enough. Okay, well, no, thank you. So I have enough. Yes, we want to go with the revolts. No. Oh, okay, we're going to keep the battle commanders. Okay, we'll give you rare materials. Okay, and mentioning that, let's go down. Possible sales here. Okay, Denmark. Rare materials. Gotta get used to these new icons. I like them well enough, but just new to me, so. No, I just need one. Okay. They've just bought New Zealand. We want to make friends in places. I don't know if we can make friends with some of the potential Axis nations enough to keep them out of the Axis, like Romania. But let's try with Norway. Good. No, not with the Spanish Republic. Not that big of a thing. Okay, we will do that with Belgium. Partially I want to do that with Belgium to improve relations with them, but also, if I can, remove the fuel in essence from being, otherwise might be, oh, well, we just lost that the Germans would capture otherwise. Let's see, who else might we trade for fuel? Well, let's see if we can trade for fuel with the US. They have deficit of fuel. How interesting. I would have thought they had a surplus. Let's look up here at Australia. They're also a deficit at fuel. Canada. They're at a surplus. Let's see if we can get a fuel from them. Okay. Good. Not that that really doing much to our great deficit here, but okay. All right. At least because I'm looking for good relations, maybe with Tibet and Australia. We're looking with good relations. Yes, China will give you rare materials. Now, why is the U.S. such a deficit with fuel? Because I would think it would be a will offer to buy some fuel. I just don't want to buy an overwhelming amount from them. Yeah, 16 cents from Republican Spain. And if we can have, it would be an interesting thing to have Spain, the Republic of Spain join, or survive, and then maybe join the Allies. That would be an interesting alt history experience to see what the AI would do. And then we can see whether I do one of my strategies of do I get them in the war, do I keep them out? Okay, we will give you Canada now that you have positive fuel balance, hopefully continuing. Do we want to have good relations, get Canada into the Allies early as possible? It's an interesting mechanic because now I know I have a fair number of Commonwealth viewers and they may know some of the details of this more than I do. The Commonwealth at this time was very much still part of the British Empire, though it was more and more less directly ruled from London. We all know still the Queen of England is still the Queen of Canada and still the Queen of Australia. Now, if she starts spouting some sort of nonsense and orders people to do nonsensical things, they'll just turn themselves into a republic and be done with it. We all know that. But if I still believe this, and I may be very wrong, and maybe more so wrong in a place like Australia versus New Zealand or Canada, which I think is closer to the monarchist sentiment still to this day. If, say, that they were such a fractured country with massive political strife and other sort of chaos, think sort of Weimar Germany or something, if that was happening even to this day, the Queen sort of tries to step in with some royal forces, if you will, that it would still have a significant effect. Of course, even at this time in the 1936, and obviously still to this day, though it's consistently been pushed down, there's republicanism in Britain. It's very different than republicanism in America, but basically is to turn Britain into a republic. Didn't really work out when they last tried it. Still was sort of more of I think technically a commonwealth, but didn't work out then, and so they not wanted to try it seriously since. So, but at this time, the king still had a lot more royal power. The British still had a lot more overall power, but like I say, the amount of, if you will, self-government, the amount of independent foreign policy for somebody like Canada is extremely greater than, say, the colony of Belize at the time, or Hong Kong or whatever. But they were part of the British Empire. Part of the reason it's done, I believe, the way it's been done is because of game mechanics. I think you could legitimately decide to put all of the, if you will, Commonwealth nations like South Africa, like Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, all just part of Britain. I think that would be a legitimate thing for a human player to sort of take over and have as a one country, one unified policy set up. The problems where you get in it, as I understand it, is the AI, because the AI will see we've got to defend Britain because the Nazis are sitting across here, and they will start shipping out potentially all forces from Australia and New Zealand because they're incidental and we can afford to lose them, etc., etc., from the AI perspective, because we've got to defend Britain, when it doesn't match reality, it doesn't match other things. That's why I believe, primarily why I believe the British Raj is more on that sort of status on the basic Hearts of Iron 4 game, that they've separated that out, because obviously things like the manpower is awfully badly screwed. India had so much more manpower capabilities, but both for industrial use and for military use, Britain was never able to mobilize it in any sort of faction way that an independent India could mobilize it, because they're obviously only limited support, though there was support, or they wouldn't. Britain is not strong enough to control India without the significant local support. Britain is strong enough to control Hong Kong if they wanted to, or Belize or Jamaica if they want to, without local support. India, they were never able to control that without a significant, not necessarily majority, but a significant element of local support within India for the British rule. Okay, we would give them supplies from money. Mexico. Japan. No, we're not going to deal with Japan. Finland? Yes. And I guess yes with Mexico. We are producing some more supplies than we need, not a whole lot. Well, that's nice. Okay, we will do this to make Yugoslavia a bit more friendly to us. Obviously, many of you know the history there, and as well as to potentially pull the fuel out of Yugoslavia for if and when Germany were to take it. Okay, British icon. The K6 red telephone box, designed by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott in 1935 to coincide with George V Jubilee. Okay, this was a major step forward, I would say a significant improvement, not like for 1968, but for 1936 in spreading out telephone communications. I know most of you are probably too young and never really heard of like party lines, like in the U.S., because they used to have, in essence, one telephone for a long time in post-war America, one telephone for a whole block, but everyone would have their own telephone in their house, so you could pick up the phone at any time and listen to any of your neighbors speaking, and only one could theoretically be used at once. So if someone had to make the call, they'd get on and go, hey, I've got to call my sister, can you get off the phone? And they would get off the phone, and then they get the operator and get them connected to it, and sort of a party line. And that's in the U.S. with all, and that isn't just in the U.S. in some rural out of the way. That was New York City. Their infrastructure, and even obviously, at this time in the 30s, often for like a major apartment building, they might just have literally one phone in it. And even that might be a party line. Putting all these independent single-use phones really helped connect people to communicate. It was a revolution. I know these are the olden days to you who grew up with always having cell phones. It's a really different thing. But okay, now this is another thing here. I don't know if this is a bug or a feature, but Maverick, who does the sort of tech and interface elements, changed something so that it says tech gain instead of what tech is gaining and by how much. To the best of my understanding, you still get the gain. It's not a bug as in you don't get the benefit. It just doesn't display what it is. It can sort of kind of be a feature in that obviously we don't have a choice. We just have to click yes, and we presume that there's only positives here. But when you have a choice of things, it's a little bit more of a mystery of how big of an effect something might have versus the cost. So again, I'm not sure whether it's a bug or a feature or somewhere in between. So realize that was starting, I think, with 851 or 852 or something like that. Some people are not very pleased by it, and if you're sort of an analytical player, which a lot of Black Ice players are, won't like it because they want to analyze the details of all, whether to choose one event or some other event kind of thing. So we're just letting this play here. You can see the new map that they've done. I think it's great. I'm conservative in multiple ways. One, just change for change's sake doesn't necessarily always come with a, I sort of somewhat rebel against it. But I think it's working out. I can easily tell which airports have aircraft in them versus not. Obviously you can see the radar here very easily, so it looks good. And coastal artillery looks good, so it looks all right, because obviously these maps have to do two things: one, look good, and two, convey its information well. So okay, King George, the death of King George V. This is a very significant effect in British history. He had been the face of Britain from a monarchical standpoint, if you will, as opposed to maybe the face of, in a political sense, of who the prime minister is. But he was sort of the face of the nation, the spokesman of the nation, if you will, for a very long time. Even while his mother, who was Queen Victoria, was still alive. After her husband Albert died, she went into mourning officially for the rest of her life. That's why you see her mostly always dressed in black. But she largely left the public stage, largely stopped going to public events, opening a parliament or other sorts of things in which you would excuse me, commonly get the crowd seeing the Queen, or photos. And obviously as the moving pictures were developed, you stopped seeing her as the face of the nation, as the human embodiment of Britain, if you will. She was up in Balmoral, up here, a lot in Scotland, and although she did come to London a fair amount, I believe, and I'm sure people saw her just entering or leaving a bit, but she was very much of a private person for most of the rest of her life. Her son, King George V, had a bit of a playboy reputation for a while. I don't know a lot about him, but when his mother died, what was it, 1901, 1902 or something? I'm sorry. Does it say when he was king through? Yeah, and they even talk about the Statute of Westminster here, 1931, the Dominion Parliaments, without royal assent from London. So, forget just when Victoria died. But once she died, he obviously stepped up and was a rather good face for Britain. And you have to realize all through World War I, he was, if you will, the national focus for Britain. So you had before Queen Victoria's death, after Queen Victoria's death, and then through the trauma of World War I, he led the nation, at least in a morale sense, for Britain. So him dying, not that it was, in my opinion, or any knowledge of, greatly unexpected. Didn't die in an accident, of some sort of car accident or a assassination or anything, so it wasn't trauma in that sense, but it was definitely a significant consequence to Britain and British public life. So we remove this and we will get now Edward VII. So autocratic charmer, yeah, I would say that was sort of mostly a good generic title for him. Just again to sort of promote Third Reich events, we are working on giving at least a few of the prominent Italian ministers some unique descriptions. Working with Pavlini on that, he's providing the basics. For that should be fully implemented in the sort of last version of TRE with new content for Black Ice. Didn't I just up this enough? I want to try to keep this. I want to keep it at 0. Okay. Oh, we've gained high popularity. Good. Send in the security police. Police buildings, or appease them. Well, since this is Britain, a generally constitutional parliamentary system. Yes, they're a monarchy as opposed to straight democracy, so they're limited by royal power. But it's not anything like a dictatorship. We're going to do appease them, which is, I think, also the most historic thing. So we will do that. And that then, of course, requires me to do this again. Okay, well, we're leaving. Let me just bump this up just a bit. Don't want to starve any unit of replacements, but this keeps us at a very limited ICs. I'm just not used to it. This Germany building up. Okay. I don't know if this is a generic event for the Allies or something specifically set up for Britain, but because I'm going to count on the U.S. primarily handling, or Australia, New Zealand in conjunction with the U.S., primarily handling the Pacific theater, and knowing that it's going to be crappy AI on both sides, but that I'm not going to go with the tougher Japan. I'm going to do with I'm a wimp. If I was playing the US or something, I would go with that. But, and when we can talk about this. Goals for this playthrough. First goal, primary goal, Britain's survival. We don't want to lose Britain. That's number one. And I mean, not just, mean we're not going to lose the British Isles. That's British survival, not just play in exile or, with strong India and other places if Germany takes it. We're going to hold Britain. Second goal is preserve the British Empire. We are going to be sort of Churchillian on this and work to preserve the British Empire, which includes anything that we control British Empire-wise. We're going to try to preserve it from conquest. Obviously, at some point, I'm sure we will lose Hong Kong, so I don't know that I'm going to withdraw the garrison here, let it fight it out. We will see what we can do when the time comes with Singapore. I am going to hope this, just because the guns and everything were looked purely at defending from naval invasion here. I agree, though we will probably at some point build at least pillboxes. I'm going to try to hold Singapore. Try is maybe the optimum word here. But we're going to do that. So we're going to try to do our best to hold together the British Empire. 3, the third level goal. We're going to support our allies in the attempt to defeat Nazi Germany, the Nazis, as Churchill would say. We're going to try to defeat the Nazis. Obviously, the first main allies will be Britain. We will do France. France. We will do what we can. If we can win the Battle of France, great. I don't have high expectations, but just as Britain did not send over all of its fighters to try to win the air war over France, particularly once they figured the French were going to lose anyways, the French were crying, we need all those British fighters, you got to help us out. Well, Britain already assessed France didn't have a chance of, at that point, and that was Churchill, I believe, at that point, as Prime Minister, didn't have a hope in hell of winning the Battle of France, and he wasn't going to lose any more British aircraft over France because he had to make sure Britain survived. So we'll see how big of a land forces army we can build up, and we're going to see what we can deploy to France, but I will withdraw it in a heartbeat if I think it's in danger of being cut off and taken, and just let France go. But if I can, hold the line somewhere, maybe here, I don't know, I will do so doggedly. But once it sort of comes to the situation, I'm going to cut and run. Similarly, once the U.S. is in the war, we will see how well between the AI and scripted invasions. I'll be happy to come in and support a torch invasion. I'll be happy to support Overlord or any of the other invasions, and anything I spot America doing, I will be happy to come in and support that, and I will use the Allied objective mechanic as much as possible to try to help my allies to do something that I can come in and help them. So that's the third level objective for this game. So to that end, and mostly to keep the British Empire together, we will be confronting Japan, though I have no hopes or plans of conquering it alone as Britain. I don't know, that would be practical. We'll see what happens because maybe Germany's going to roll right over me. I don't know. But if we can take Germany, obviously by that time Italy will have been defeated. We will then see if there's, anything Britain can do as a direct invasion of Japan or not. I don't know. We'll see about that. That's very much a we'll see. So, but we're primarily looking at those others as my goals for this series. Let's go to 30. Chaplin's Modern Times. Modern Times, a 1936 comedy film written and directed by Charlie Chaplin. Well, very funny movie. So, USA, following effects, okay. And okay, we've got plenty of free spies up there, so let's look at this a little bit more. We don't need that much diplomacy. We will be using some bit more than we have now. And I don't think we need that much on espionage. But let's keep a little, sort of for the fun of it. Okay, well, we're just about... Okay, Egypt, you can have the supplies for the money, that's great. Now, intelligence. Let's spy on Germany. They are our primary potential enemy. We want to know about it. Why did I scroll all the way down there? And let's do tech espionage. And we're going to try to increase their threat a little bit. That way, hopefully, nations that feel their threat will be more likely to choose joining the Allies, because they're a threat to world peace. Okay, now this is one of the few Third Reich events. There's a corresponding event which I did leave in for this playthrough that you see when you're playing Germany for the national radio thing for Germany. But this is Broadcasting House. There's a picture of it, sort of an interesting Art Deco type building, still in existence. This is the headquarters and registered office of the BBC, which obviously at this time is purely maybe a slightly overstatement. They did do some television stuff that was being developed, but a radio national radio system. It very much was a government-promoted attempt to unify probably the British Empire, if you will, with this new medium of radio, bringing a national center together. So that will affect things. That's a significant development for Britain. I don't know the situation in France, and as you see here, we now have, which are the two effects of that, small news and politics and small entertainment shows. Those are the two that I thought accurately represented what the BBC was doing. You don't have the territorial pride one, whatever, I forget what it is, right offhand. Well, let's just look and see what it is. I know it's here. Heroic tales. I don't really, from my knowledge of what was being broadcast from the BBC, doesn't really fit sort of the heroic tales model at this time. Once the war is starting, that's a different matter, entirely different matter. In the US during this age, there was a radio boom, like the tech boom that was, and also turned out to be a radio bubble as well, meaning there were thousands and thousands of radio stations all over the US that were springing up at this time. And a lot of them, I mean, these sort of huge provinces they were often a radio station or multiple radio stations just in one county. I mean, they were often very small. It was a very chaotic situation. A lot of them had limited hours of use, just because having DJs and whatever, and also did lots of radio dramas and other things. Very localized, very dispersed, but to the best of my knowledge, and it's reasonably good, there was no national effort like the BBC or like the Germans to have a centralized message coming out from the government in any form. No nationalized effort. In the US, that does change during World War II. They don't have a BBC. I guess eventually, and I don't know exactly the founding of the PBS, public broadcast stations, and that does have radio element. That may have a World War II. Maybe it has a Depression element, but I don't think it does. Don't really know the history of it now that I'm thinking about that. But they definitely did make in the US, a huge propaganda effort to harness radio and movies to tell the stories and do all of these functions once the war started. But to the best of my understanding, there was no national effort in the US. So this doesn't, in my opinion, represent... and so since there isn't a national effort, there isn't a coordinated single driving message, if you will. And that is sort of somewhat my understanding, and I agree it's very limited, of places like France. Much more of a chaotic, everybody doing their own thing, if you will, wherein with the BBC and the Germans, and obviously there's also the Soviets, but I have not worked on the details and don't know what level the Soviets had in 1936 as a radio broadcasting center. Because partially I just wonder how many people in the Soviet Union had any sort of access to listen to radio. So that's sort of, even if they had all those propaganda shows, just how many people were listening to them as a nationwide effect. So those would all have to be answered in my mind before I decide to create an event like this. But so we have small entertainment and small news and politics. So I think that is very good. And that I have as a pre-existing thing, so you don't have any sort of cost to that. Okay, well, let's see, what does Belgium want? Okay, we'll buy some fuel from... I think this is where we're going to end this episode. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you will enjoy watching this series. I will want your input because, as I say, I've never played a full campaign of Britain. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of little things that you guys will know who have played this before that could definitely help me and help the other viewers on with key elements there as we go through. So please comment as you go through and watch this series. This is going to be a very interesting journey, a very fun journey, I hope, for both you and me. And of course, thanks for liking the videos. I will see you next time.